Hello and welcome back from spring break. This is lecture 18 of Data 102, and it is going to be the first of two lectures on the topic of multi-armed bandits. Okay, so I first need to tell you what multi-armed bandits are. And we're going to start by returning to the setting of online decision making. That we've really seen in this course. Okay, so online decision making is sequential adaptive decision making under uncertainty. Okay, and we have already seen this in the context of forced discovery rate control, right? So we've already seen online FDR control. And there, what we're trying to do is to keep the FDR below some thresholds. And so the decisions we're making at each step was that we received a new hypothesis and we decided whether or not to accept it or reject it. Okay, but in that setting, all the hypotheses that we observe are not necessarily related to each other. Okay, so each one can be completely different of the previous ones, and the only goal is to try to keep this FDR below the threshold. Okay, so the adaptation is only with respect to how to maintain the budget. Okay, in our context, we want to consider a situation where we want to make the same decision repeatedly. Okay, and so this is a slightly different context from before, because now that we're making the same decision over and over again, you can try to learn from the consequences of our earlier decisions. And in so doing, we can improve the quality of our subsequent decisions. All right, so this is a paradigm. So this paradigm of making the same decision over and over again is a paradigm that captures a large number of problems arising in many settings, including those in science, business, and industry. Okay, in fact, if you think back to your own daily life, so this is something that you experience all the time. Okay, so recall the last time you tried to learn a new skill via trial and error. Okay, so say you're trying to learn a new instrument, or for the sake of concreteness, suppose that you're trying to learn chess. Okay, so what would you do? Okay, so you'll be playing many games against some AI or human opponents, and you're gonna see over the course of many games what moves or what strategies are more successful, and then you're going to sort of like to shift the strategy so that you're going to change your gameplay so that you will make the more successful moves more often, or use the more successful strategies more often. Okay, so that's one example. Another example that you might experience is if you move to a new city, and then you have to figure out, okay, and then you want to go to some restaurants and you want to figure out which restaurants you like. Okay, so what would you do in that case? Okay, so you have some recommendation systems, but food preference is very personal. So you have to try out yourself, right? So you try a few different restaurants, you see which you like, and then you keep going back to the ones that you enjoyed more. Okay, so all of these are examples of online decision making, of updating and improving your decisions in the light of what happened in the past. Okay, and in these settings, a fundamental phenomenon that happens is called the exploration trade-off. Okay, so I think written down exploration usually comes first. So I'm going to write it this way. Okay, and what is this about? Okay, so here we're making decisions under uncertainty, meaning that before we make the decisions, we don't really know what the payoffs are. Okay, so whenever we are in this setting, right? We're going to have two competing urges. Okay, so two urges. So on the one hand, we want to make the best decision given what we know about the world at the moment. And doing this is called exploitation because you're exploiting your knowledge at a given point in order to make the best decision. But at any point, our knowledge of the world is incomplete. And so it also makes sense to try to acquire more information. And then we can use this new information to improve our decisions in the future. Okay, and this is called exploration. All right, and why is that a trade-off? That's because the actions that you take to explore, right, to acquire more information, are usually going to be different from the actions that will give you the optimal payoffs given what you currently know about the world, right? Because when you explore, you're usually taking actions that are unfamiliar or that you know less about, and so there's always a risk, right, that those actions can be bad actions compared to at least some good action that you already know about. Okay, so there's a trade-off, and how to make this trade-off and how to balance exploration and exploitation is a fundamental problem. Okay, so this is almost the fundamental problem of online decision making. Okay, and then so let's think about what happens in the two examples that we talked about. Okay, so like in chess, we could we could just somehow hit upon some strategy that we can use to have to win several games in a row, and it's sort of tempting to just settle down and only play that strategy, right? But if we do that, then we sort of just we don't learn anymore. We stagnate, and so we don't learn if there's a more powerful strategy, or strategy that's more adapted to certain opponents or certain situations. And then for restaurants, okay, so what does exploitation mean? Okay, so it means that we have a favorite restaurant that we like, and then we just keep going to it, and we don't really want to step out of our comfort zone and try out new food that we never tried before. Okay, so even in those daily settings, right, it's very clear what this exploitation trade-off is. Okay, and so that brings us to the topic of bandits. And if this is the first time you're hearing about or seeing bandit problems, okay, the name is really interesting. Okay, so we're going to explain what are bandit problems and why they are called bandit problems. Okay, so more precisely, we're going to talk about multi-armed bandits. Okay, so what is this? So this is a particular setting for online decision making. Okay, so adaptive, sequential decision making under uncertainty. And the multi-armed bandits problem is characterized by the following property. Okay, so at every decision, we receive an immediate payoff. Okay, and the technical terminology for this is a reward. Okay, so every decision that you make is going to give you some rewards. Okay, so this is we're talking about this in sort of a more general sense. So this also includes situations where you could actually incur some kind of loss, right? So reward need not be something that's positive. Okay, so every decision is going to give you some rewards. Okay, some immediate rewards, and the reward is going to be independent of previous decisions. Okay, so only your decision at that time point is going to matter. All right, so this is a very specific model of online decision making. Okay, and it applies to some settings and not to other settings. Okay, so let's think back to the restaurant example. Okay, so there's an example of a bandit problem. Okay, if you think about it, you see that every time you have a meal, you're going to get some pleasure from eating that meal, right? Or pleasure or displeasure. And so that is immediate, right? Okay, and then if I'm having lunch today, how much pleasure I get from the meal or choosing my food today is, you can think of it as being somewhat independent of all my previous meals, right? So that's not exactly true, but it's a good approximation. Okay, so what I ate for lunch yesterday shouldn't really have an impact on my enjoyment of my lunch today. All right, or if you want to be, and if you want to be to sort of change the setting to be even more fitting to these assumptions, you can think about just eating out, right? So I only eat out, say I only eat out once a week, then my previous meal orders a week ago, so that should probably have even less influence on my enjoyment of my lunch today. Okay, so that's the restaurant example. And for the example about learning how to play chess, then this is sort of not such a great, it's not such a great fit to the setting of bandit problems, right? Because in chess, every time you make a move, there's no immediate payoff, right? Okay, so you make a move, nothing happens, but then it goes to your opponent's turns and they make a move, and then you make the next move. So where's the payoff in this example, right? It only happens at the very end of the game if we win, okay? And a move is helpful to you if it sort of increases your chances of winning at the end of the game. Okay, and because we do not receive an immediate payoff, okay, this is not really a good example of a bandit problem, right? And if you try to impute some value, some payoff for every move, then in some sense the payoffs the payoff that you get from one move is going to be dependent on the previous moves that you've taken, right? Because it depends on the state of the game at that point. Okay, so in that sense, it really violates the assumptions of the bandit problem setting. Okay, and so chess is actually it's much more accurately described by the reinforcement learning paradigm. Okay, and we're going to see reinforcement learning in a later lecture in this course. Okay, so I've given you a very informal description of what bandit problems are. Okay, so let's be a little bit more formal. Okay, so we're going to introduce some math notation later. Now I'm just going to take an intermediate step and be a little bit more precise about what I mean. Okay, so for bandits, we're going to consider a decision maker. So someone who's making a decision, and we're going to call this person a learner. And this learner is going to be given k options to choose from. Okay, so these options are called arms. Right? And then, okay, so we're going to have, so this learner is going to make decisions sequentially, and at every step, the learner has to choose an arm and this choice is called pulling an arm. All right, and then what happens? Okay, so each arm is associated with some distribution, okay? So some probability distribution over rewards. And so if you pull an arm, you get okay, so the learner is going to get a sample. So they're going to get a reward that's sampled from the corresponding arm distribution. Oops. Okay. And so, okay, so it's like you have these buttons here, and then I want to know which one to press at every step. And every time I press it, right, I'm going to get some rewards here. Okay, and if I press a different button, I'm going to get some of the reward instead. Okay, so maybe I get even more money. Okay, and then we keep repeating this. We keep pressing the button and pulling an arm, and we keep getting, the learner keeps getting a new reward. Okay, and here, the key element is that this reward is stochastic. Okay, so if I press it the first time, I get 1 note. Press this the second time, right, I might get 3 notes. Okay, I press it the third time, right, I get nothing. Okay, so there's some randomness that goes into the rewards that we get from each arm. Okay, and if you think back to the restaurant example, right, this is also sort of natural, right? Okay, so every time we patronize some restaurants, there is some randomness in how much we enjoy our meal at the restaurant, right? So maybe you have a bad experience, right? So that could be because the food actually is bad, right? So maybe the restaurant is just bad, or it could be bad luck, right? So we could have ordered the wrong dish, a dish that is not to our taste, or maybe the kitchen is just having a bad day, they have too many customers, or we were just in a bad mood. Okay, we were having lunch with somebody that we don't like. Okay, so in that case, maybe instead of just dismissing the restaurant, right, we might want to give it a few more chances. Okay? And so we need to account for possible bad luck or good luck. Okay, so what's the goal? So this is the setup, and what's the goal? Okay, the goal for this multi-arm bandit problem is to maximize the sum of all the rewards. Of sum of rewards over all time steps. Okay, so if we play this game n rounds, okay, so we're going to make n decisions. At every decision, I'm going to receive some rewards. And so what I want to do is to maximize the sum of all of these n rewards. Okay, so sometimes rewards that happen further down in the road are discounted, okay, meaning that we see them as less important than the immediate rewards. Okay, but we're not going to consider this setting. All right, so how do we measure our progress? So how do we measure the quality of our decision? Right, so it's natural to think about the quality in terms of the sum, right? The sum of all of our rewards of all time steps. Okay, but first we need to account for randomness, right? So we don't just want to look at the sum of the rewards over one run. We need to take an expectation. And not only that, right? We need some baseline for comparison, right? So what if I say that I get $10 from making these 5 decisions? I want to know what the best course of action actually gives, right? So $10 could either be good or bad depending on what the optimal decisions is going to give me. Okay, so I need to take a difference to make this relative. And so this gives rise to the idea of regret. Okay, and so regret, as the term means, as the word means in everyday use, is sort of some notion of opportunity cost, right? So I know what was the best series of decisions, and then I see what is my series of decisions, and I compare the reward that I got versus the reward that I could have gotten if I made the optimal decisions. Okay, and so we probably will never be able to make the optimal decisions because we don't have perfect knowledge, but we assume that there is some oracle who is omniscient, who knows everything, and this oracle is able to make these perfect decisions. Okay, so regret is going to compare our rewards against the oracle who keeps pulling the optimal arm. Okay, so this is you think of this as the opportunity cost that we incur from making suboptimal decisions. And now, okay, so you sort of know what bandit problems are now. Now let me just say a few words about history. Okay, and why bandit problems are called bandit problems. Okay, so bandit problems were first introduced in 1933, so a long time ago. And it started with this paper by William Thompson. Okay, we're going to see his name come up again later in today's lecture. And he wrote an article in this journal, Biometrica. So this is Biometrica is I think the landmark journal for biostatistics. And so what he was interested in was medical trials. Okay, so there's randomized experiments that we saw a few lectures back. And recalling that experiment, we have a fixed study population, and then we're testing whether or not some drug is effective or not. All right. But usually, a trial may take like a year or several years, and it might become clear after the first few months that the drug is a lot more effective than the placebo, right, or whatever else you're comparing the drug against. And so then some ethical issues arise, right? Because if it sort of becomes clear that the drug is more effective than the no drug, then why are we not giving that drug to the people who have been randomly assigned to receiving a placebo, right? Because then if you don't do that, then more of them might die, right? Or they might have some, they might fall sick, and we could prevent that, right? By changing the way, by sort of, giving them the drug. Okay, but if we do that, then that sort of violates the design of the experiments, right? And so we're not going. That's going to make the data that we collect at the end of the experiments not as good, right? And we won't be able to do the kinds of scientific conclusions that we might want to do. Okay, so hopefully one can sort of do this experiment. So instead of having this fixed design that we start off with, right, we could try to have some adaptive design, and we could slowly assign more people to receiving the drug if it seems that the drug is more effective, right, or vice versa. Then we still have some people who are not going to receive the drug, but it's a much smaller number. Okay, so this will help to get around some of the ethical issues. Okay, but in this first paper, he did not use the term bandit problems. The term bandit problems actually comes from 1950s with these two people, Friedrich Mosteller and Robert Bush. Okay, and what they were doing was to study animal learning. Okay, and so they had these mazes that was in a T-shape, and they wanted to see whether the mouse would go to the left or to the right. And I think at one end of the maze there was some cheese, maybe some rewards, and the other had no rewards, right? So they wanted to see how quickly a mouse would learn how to find the right path. Okay, so this was an experiment for mice. They also did corresponding experiments for humans. Okay, and obviously humans are not going to want to run in the maze, so they did something different. So they had a slot machine that was special. Okay, so here, this slot machine is going to have two arms, and so the humans had to decide which arm to pull. Okay, and none of you have probably seen one of those old-fashioned slot machines where it's an arm that you pull, and then the slots keep the slot machine starts to run, and then you might get lucky, you might get not. Right. So in a classic slot machine that you see in a casino, there's only one arm that you can pull. Right. There's no decision. Right. And the only thing that happens is whether you get lucky, you get or you not. Right. So everything is just random. It's just pure chance. Okay. And in this example, in this experiment, there was a decision to be made. You have two different arms, and every time you put an arm, right, there'll be a different distribution of possible rewards on this machine. And so they call this machine a two-armed bandit, right? Because there's the slot machines, the traditional slot machines were called bandits or one-armed bandits because they steal your money, right? Because you can win sometimes, but in expedition over the long term, you're going to lose money to the casino. Okay, so that's how the name bandits came about and how it stuck to these genre problems. Okay, so before moving on to the math and the formalism, let me just say that bandit problems have found a lot of applications in various settings. Okay, so they're used in healthcare. Okay, so remember how bandit started with medical trial design? Okay, so they are sort of being used in that setting now. Okay, and something I know is actually happening is that currently people are very interested in how to personalize mobile healthcare applications or apps. And how do we do it? Okay, every person is different. Okay, so they run some kind of bandits algorithm in order to personalize these healthcare apps. All right. And another setting is where we want to adjust the dosage of some drug. Okay, so drug warfarin, which is a blood thinner, is an example of this. Okay, so the optimal dosage for different people is very different. So again, we need to do some kind of trial and error. And so this is also cast as a bandits problem. Right, so those are some examples of healthcare. Okay, so finance is another example. Okay, so when you want to do sequential updating of your portfolio, then you can also think of this as a bandits problem. And then business, we need to decide the prices of our products. Okay, and we need to adjust this to various situations. Okay, and then there's also other stuff. So many other applications like telecommunications, etc. And apart from that, bandits have also found use as subroutines in other machine learning algorithms. Okay, so a very popular theme right now is AutoML, meaning that we want to automatically choose your hyperparameters for your deep learning algorithms or other supervised learning algorithms. And so it's a big question how to optimize these hyperparameters, right? And using bandits or using the bandits framework has had many promising results. Okay, and then bandit problems or bandit algorithms also use as subroutines in reinforcement learning algorithms. Okay, and they also occur in other machine learning contexts as well. All right, so many applications, and beyond applications, beyond these practical applications, okay, bandit problems are also very interesting from a theoretical perspective, right? And so in some sense, they're very fundamental to theoretical machine learning, right? And why is this the case? It's because they capture this exploration trade-off in its most fundamental elemental state, right? And this exploration trade-off it is sort of the problem or the fundamental problem of online decision making. It is now time to introduce the formal mathematical setup of multi-arm bandits. Okay, so we're going to start with some notation. So I'm going to use curly A to denote the set 1 to big Q. Okay, and this is going to be our set of arms. Okay, so we're going to index each arm with an integer. Okay, and we're going to call the integer the arm. Okay, just to use notation. And then for every arm, we're going to have some distribution. And we're going to denote this distribution by PA. Okay, so this is the reward distribution. For arm A. Okay, recall that A is an integer. And we're going to assume that PA is 1 sub-Gaussian for each A. All right, so recall what sub-Gaussian is. It's defined by this formula or this inequality. All right, and then this formula has several consequences that we saw in the previous lecture. All right, and now this setup of arms and reward distributions is called an environment. Okay, so this is the environment in which that the learner interacts with. And if you have different reward distributions, we have a different environment. Okay, so the learner and the environment interact over n rounds. And what happens in each round is that, and so let's call this round T. First, the learner selects an arm, which we're going to denote with A sub T. And then the environment samples a reward, which we're going to denote with X sub T from the arm distribution for the arm AT. So this is going to be P sub AT. And after sampling this reward is revealed to the learner. All right, and this is the only reward that the learner sees. Okay, so the learner does not see get samples from the other arms that they do not select at this time point. Okay, so we have this interaction, and so this is going to give us data. And this data is just going to be a sample from a joint distribution. Over the sequence A1, okay, so the action in the first step, the reward in the first step, X1, and then A2, X2, so on and so forth until AN, Xn. Okay, so we get the joint distribution over the sequence. Okay. And some additional mathematical formalism that I wrote in the notes, but it's not so super important, so I'm not going to say here. I'm just going to say that I'm just going to make one more definition. So the set of rules that the learner uses to select arms AT at each step. Okay, so this set of rules is called a policy, and it's usually denoted with the symbol pi. All right. Right. So when we want to see how, so the policy is, as you can think of the policy as a strategy, and when we want to compare our strategy with what is optimum, we are doing this, right? So we need to consider performance in terms of each strategy. All right. So now, okay, so previously we said that we want to measure performance in terms of the total the sum of all the rewards over n rounds. Okay, so let's introduce some notation for that. Okay, so the total reward, we're going to denote it with S sub n. Okay, and this is going to be the sum over, okay, so that's just t over n rounds of x sub t. Right, and what's the goal? Goal was to find the arm the highest mean, which you're going to denote using mu A. Okay, so this is expectation with respect to the distribution, the reward distribution for A. Okay, we're going to call these, so we're going to call this the mean of A. Okay, so there's some abuse of terminology here. Okay, so we're going to identify the with its reward distribution. And our mu star is going to be our symbol for the maximum of all of these mu A's. Okay, so this is going to be the best and now we can define what the regret is. Okay, so the regret of some policy pi is going to be now, right, the best possible rewards, which means that we pull the optimal n times. Okay, and then this is going to be an expectation, and then minus the expectation of the reward that we get, or the total reward that we get if we follow the policy pi. All right. So this is the quantity that we care about, and we want to find a policy that minimizes the regret or has a relatively small regret. All right. Here's some more terminology. So the regret is going to be closely tied to this notion of suboptimality gap. Okay, and this is going to be denoted delta sub A. Okay, so we're going to have a suboptimality gap for every arm, right? And this is going to be the difference between the mean of the best arm minus the mean for that arm. Okay, and it's denoted using delta A. And now, at every time point, we can count the number of times that we put arm A, and this is going to be denoted T sub A of T. Okay, and one way to write out this is to sum over the T rounds of the indicator that the arm put in round S is equal to A. All right. So now that we have introduced this optimality gap and introduced this this T sub A notation, okay, we can say the theorem that characterizes the regret, or that decomposes the regret into something that is more tractable and more intuitive. And this is that we can write the regret as regret denoted R sub n as a sum over all the arms of the suboptimality gap for the arm times the expected number of times that that arm is going to be put in the n rounds. All right, so this is not too hard to prove. Okay, you're going to do a little bit of this and the homework, I believe. Okay, and this is also going to appear in the notes. Okay, so what does this say? Okay, so let's go back up to look at the notion of regret. Okay, so I should have denoted this using R sub n earlier. Okay, so regrets, you can think of this as the sum of the difference between the optimal arm, the mean of the optimal arm, and the arm mean of the arm that we pull. And then we're summing this up over n rounds. Okay, so that's the quantity on the left-hand side. The quantity on the right is not the sum over the rounds, but the sum over the arms, right? And this is now saying that we can write the regrets as the sum over the arms of the number of times each arm is being pulled times the optimality gap of that arm. Okay, so it's very intuitive, and it just turns out to be a lot more convenient to write the regret in the form that we see on the right-hand side. Okay, so we're almost done with the formalism. Okay, so there's one last quantity that we need to introduce that turns out to be really important. And this is going to be the notion of the average reward that has been observed so far for some arm A. Okay, so I wrote here at time t. So time, rounds, step. Okay, I'm going to use these terms interchangeably. Okay, and this is going to be denoted by mu hat sub A of t. Okay, and this is going to be simply an average over the number of times that arm A has been pulled of the reward that we observed for that arm. Okay, and the way I've written it down over here, right? So this is an alternate way of writing this, writing a sum over the rewards observed for that arm. Okay, so equivalently, I can write it as a sum over all the rewards, but for every reward, I only add it to the sum if the arm selected that step is equal to arm A. Okay, so that's what this indicator is doing. Okay, so this is the formalism. In the next video, we're going to give you some more intuition about how to, about the bandit setting by introducing an interactive widget. And then after that, we're going to talk about some bandit algorithms for solving the bandit's problem, or by solving, I mean for coming up with what I mean is that we're going to see some algorithms that for selecting the arms, so how to select an arm at each step, that are going to be reasonable. And in fact, some of them are going to have very low regrets, as we shall see. The best way to get some intuition for what is happening with multi-arm bandits is to just run the simulation and play around with it. Okay, and this is exactly what we're going to do in this video. Okay, so this is some code that has been developed by previous Data 102 stuff, and I think this is really neat. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, and we're going to have this nice little app over here. All right, so what is happening here? So let me try to parse this diagram for you. Okay, so here we have 5 arms. And for some reason, we're starting the indexing with 0. I'm 0, I'm 1, I'm 2, I'm 3, I'm 4. And then each of these arms is going to have a reward distribution that you can see on the right-hand side. Okay, so this is going to be, so this lime green curve is the reward distribution for arm 4. This one over here, the teal curve, is the arm reward distribution for arm 1, or arm 0 rather, and then so on and so forth. And the means of each of these distributions are going to be indicated with the dotted lines over here. Okay, so you can see that arm number 4 is the optimal arm. It has the biggest mean, followed by the teal arm 0. Let's see, and arm 2. Then arm 3, and then arm 1 is the worst. Okay, so these are the true arm distributions. Now, what's the deal with these dots and these half error bars over here? Okay, so these dots over here are the observed reward means. And what has happened already is that each of the arms has already been pulled once, even though we just initialized. Okay, so you can see the number of times that each arm has been pulled over here. So these are the numbers denoted with N0, N1, N2, N3, N4. And okay, so these are the means. So you can see that the mean, the observed mean for arm 1 is pretty optimistic. Okay, so it's a lot higher than the true mean. Okay, but then if you pull, let's pull this arm. So we can pull it by clicking on this. Okay, so we still got lucky. Okay, it still was a lot higher than the true mean. Okay, click it again. Okay, this one is not so lucky. And then you can see that slowly but surely, the observed mean is regressing so that it becomes closer and closer to the true mean. Okay, and then what's the deal with this error bar? As we click it, you can see that it sort of shrinks, right? And that's because this is really an error bar. Okay, so this is like so this is going to be a confidence interval, but we only draw half. This is a confidence interval for the true mean of that arm, but we only draw half of it because we only care about the top and not the bottom. Okay. All right, and the reason why we only care about the top is because that's the input to one of the algorithms, the bandit algorithms that we're going to see, which is called the upper confidence bound algorithm, UCB. And we're going to talk about this algorithm in a later video. Okay. So now, as we keep clicking this, okay, we're taking more and more steps. So I think now we have already taken 8 steps in addition to the first 5 pulls of each of the arms. And as we take more steps, you can see that this graph below is changing. Okay, and this graph is a graph of the pseudo regret against time. All right, so pseudo regret is a little bit different from regrets. Okay, so there's a subtle difference between it. So recall that regret was equal to the expected difference between the mean of the optimal arm and some of the rewards that we have when we follow some policy. Okay, and this is going to be an expectation over the rewards as well as the arm choices, AT. Okay, AT might be random depending on what the values of XT we've observed so far, or the algorithm itself could be random. So pseudo regrets is sort of halfway there. Okay, so we still take an expectation over the XTs in terms of the values of the rewards that we get by pulling each arm. But now we condition on the ATs. We condition on the arm choices. Okay, so far I've only been pulling 0. Okay, so at every step, the regret is going to be increased by an amount, which is the difference between mu star and mu sub 0. Okay, so that's the suboptimality gap of 0. All right, and you can see why we have to do this, right? Because every time we run the simulation, right, we don't account for all possibilities, right? Because we have to make a single choice for the arm at every step. Okay, so we definitely have to condition on the arm choices. Okay, so how do we get from the pseudo regret to the true regret? We're going to have to run the simulation many times. Okay, and this would give us randomness over the action choices as well. And then we just take an average over all of these, like 100 runs of the simulation. Okay, so that's the pseudo regret. Okay, and as you can see, as you make other choices, okay, so the shape can change, right? So it seems that arm 4 is the most promising, so I keep clicking it. And you can see that if I click it, then the pseudo regret remains constant because this arm is the optimal arm, so I don't incur any further costs if I exploit this at every step. All right, so this is a very neat simulation, so I encourage you to play around with this. So there's some other things that you can tweak. Okay, so you can change the number of arms over here. And you can, so you can kind of write your own algorithm, so how to choose the arms. Okay, but this is slightly advanced. So we're going to come back to this after we introduce 2 algorithms for, two bandit algorithms for determining the arm choice at every step. The first algorithm that we're going to consider is called explore then commit. And how this works is heavily implied by the name of the algorithm. All right, so every bandit algorithm has to address this exploration-exploitation trade-off, and exploiting commit, or ETC for short, addresses this trade-off by dividing exploration and exploitation into two different phases. In the first phase, we are going to explore, and in the second phase, we exploit. Okay, and what exploration means here is that we need to try out every arm a few times, right? And then we can see which one is the best. All right, so it always makes sense to try out every arm at least once. Okay, so this all follows the old saying in life that you should try everything at least once in life. All right, and because the rewards are pretty stochastic, we don't just want to try every arm once. We could get unlucky, so we want to try every arm a few times. Okay, and that's exactly what ETC does. Okay, so in the first phase, we're going to pull each arm some fixed number of times, say m times. And then after that, in the second phase, we're going to keep exploiting the best arm that was identified during the exploration phase. Okay, so let's set m is equal to 5 and execute ETC manually by hand. Okay, so I'm going to pull every arm 5 times. Okay, so every arm has already been pulled once, so I just need to do it 4 more times. Okay, and as I pull the arms, you can see that the regret is evolving as so. Okay, and now we're done with the exploration phase, and we want to go on to the exploit phase. Okay, so now I look at the which has the highest mean. Okay, so it seems like the blue guy has the highest observed mean. Okay, so it's slightly above that for arm 4. Okay, but I think this is still higher. Okay, so now in my exploitation phase, I'm just going to keep clicking this. Okay, and as you can see, okay, so we are right. This was indeed the best arm. So as I click it, the regrets or the pseudo regret stays put. Okay, so it does not increase any further. Okay, and this is awesome, right? Because this means that after 25 rounds in the first phase, every subsequent round is going to not increase our regrets. Okay. Okay, so this is really nice. However, there's a catch, right? Because we kind of got lucky. Okay, so we got lucky in the sense that after we pulled every arm 5 times, it did turn out that the arm with the highest observed mean was indeed the arm that had the highest true mean. Okay, but that does not necessarily have to be the case. Okay, so let's try to rerun this simulation. Okay, so I'm using the sim random seeds. Okay, so if I rerun this, and suppose I run explode and commit. Okay, so what went wrong here? Okay, so suppose I run explode and commit with m is equal to 3 in the first phase. Okay, so instead of clicking each 5 times, now I just do it 3 times. And wow, look at this. Okay, so after 3 pulls, the arm that has the highest mean is not arm 2, but arm 4, right? And so now, if this is where I draw the line, and this is where I end the exploration phase, then I'm going to keep clicking this arm. And then you can see that here, no matter how many more times we let, how many more rounds we let the algorithm run, right? My regret is going to increase linearly because I'm going to be clicking this suboptimal arm for every single subsequent round. All right, and so this is clearly bad because at some point it becomes clear that perhaps, this, well, if all you see are the means, then you would never know this, right? But this arm is suboptimal, right? So we're going to incur additional regret of the suboptimality gap at every step. Okay, so that's one of the fallbacks. That's one of the drawbacks of the ETC algorithm. And we can always try to overcome this by setting m to be higher, right? But we also don't want to set it to be too high. If not, we're never going to stop exploring, or we might explore a lot more than we needed to. Okay, so it's not quite clear how to set M. And so that's a big problem. In the last part of today's lecture, I'm going to introduce a second bandit algorithm. And the name of this algorithm is called the upper confidence bound algorithm, or UCB for short. All right, so UCB here does not stand for UC Berkeley, it stands for upper confidence bound. Okay, and this algorithm is meant to fix some of the shortcomings of exploit and commit. Okay, and the main problem with exploit and commit is that usually it does not explore enough. All right. So as time goes on, as the time horizon becomes longer and longer, you sort of want to use more and more of that budget to do more exploration. But exploring commit has only a fixed number of rounds of exploration at the very start. Okay, and so the basic principle of UCB that tries to fix this is that of so the name of this principle is optimism in the face of uncertainty. And the idea is to assume that the world is as nice as possible. Okay, and this is sort of a general principle. So in the restaurant example, for instance, being optimistic in the face of uncertainty means that even if you have not tried some cuisine before, okay, so say to use some examples, so say you've never tried Japanese food before, right? And you're completely unfamiliar with it, then if you abide by this principle, you should assume that you might actually like it. Okay, so it might, however you envision it to be, is probably a little bit better than that. Okay, and so this would mean that you're incentivized to explore the unknown and to try it out and see if it's to your taste. All right. So this is pretty common sense. And so in the context of bandits, what this means is that when we want to select the next arm, our strategy is to, okay, a naive strategy would be to simply look at the means or the observed average rewards at the given point. Okay, so that would be a nice strategy. But being optimistic in the face of uncertainty means that we do not use the means, but we use the upper confidence bounds for the true means. Okay, and by using these upper confidence bounds, right? So this means that we are incentivized to do more exploration. Okay, so we're going to see a more mathematical treatment of this in the next lecture. But for now, I just want to give you some intuition as to what this algorithm is doing. Okay, so let's try to run this by hand. Okay, so we always start by pulling each arm one time, okay, to give us some information to start with. And then at every step, henceforth, we see which arm has the highest upper confidence bounds, and then we pull it. Okay, so first step, I pull this one. Oh, okay, it's still the best, so I'm going to pull it again. Still the best, put it again. Still the best, still the best. Okay, now it's no longer the best, so I'm going to click this one instead. This one's the best. I'm going to keep pulling it. Right? Okay, so now this one, I don't know which one is better. Probably this one. No, this one is better. This one's still better. And this one's better. Now the middle one's better. Okay, and now I can keep clicking this until I'm going to keep clicking it until, let's see, until now it's sort of right. So around now the error bar is small enough so that now the upper confidence bound for the fourth arm is larger than that for the second arm. So I'm going to go back to clicking this one for some time. Okay, so if you're not quite sure what to do next, you can always press this button. Okay, so this button tells you the arm that you have to click if you follow the upper confidence bound algorithm. And then you can see how the pseudo regret evolves as you run this. Okay, so this is how the upper confidence bound or UCB works. Okay, so it's very intuitive. And we're going to explore this, we're going to try to analyze this algorithm in more detail in the next lecture.